folks, and welcome to Mountain Talk here on WMMT. I'm Parker Hobson. So it was on November 26th, 1985, that this ongoing experiment in Appalachian people-powered community radio, WMMT, first went on the air. And if you're keeping score at home, that means that just a few weeks ago, WMMT officially turned 40 years old. To celebrate this radio station of ours, now officially reaching middle age, this week on Mountain Talk, we bring you a special treat from our archives, a retrospective panel on WMMT history that we held in the Appalshop Theater back in 2015, then on the occasion of our 30th birthday. Now, so many people have been so monumentally important to WMMT over the years, and no one group or panel or show could ever tell the whole story. But in this panel, which we held during the 2015 Seedtime on the Cumberland Festival, we had the privilege of hearing a whole mess of amazing stories from a special group of WMMT staffers and DJs and friends from over the years, including Rich Kirby, Jim Webb, Ray Lawson, Cheryl Marshall, Tom Hansel, Elizabeth Sanders, and Sylvia Ryerson. You'll also hear my voice as the host of the evening. Somehow this recording has never actually been aired, but we're delighted to share with you today this special postcard from a special evening, which has been edited for the radio. As a final note, today's show goes out in particular to our great friends Jim Webb and Ray Lawson, who we're about to hear from, but who have passed in the years since we taped this. Here's the show. We hope you enjoy it. And I thought it would be cool to start with, to frame this whole thing, is Mad Be clip number 1, and this is Buck Maggard introducing his weekly show, and maybe Rich, you could frame this clip.
Well, yeah, Buck Maggard was a person who touched many, many lives, mine and certainly included, from Perry County, an incredibly warm, friendly, cheerful person who, the cliche is you say about somebody that they never met a stranger, but that would be Buck, and got many of us kind of into the notion of, first of all, listening to the radio station. He kind of, in a lot of ways, he epitomized what a community radio station is. It was not he was not slick, but he was, he had a lot to say, and he said it from his heart. And he was also just funny, and knew as much about music as anybody I've ever known in this whole kind of music that we have around here. So we've got just a little clip of Buck introducing his show one day, and then another time when somebody asked him just how he thought about it, doing it when he sat down. What was he trying to do when he sat down in front of the microphone?
All right, Little Liza Jane, you know what that means. The old Buck coming in here for deep in tradition. Right up 3 o'clock today, bringing you the very best in early bluegrass and some good old mountain traditional music. Spotlighting a good album from 2:30 to 3 o'clock. Levi and Eda for 12 o'clock. So stay tuned with us throughout the day here for the very best. Okay, and I want to say hi to all the folks out there. Real pretty day here in November. Not long to Old Turkey Day, and with the day before election. Now, I want to tell you things are getting hot. Everybody, all the candidates are hotter than billy goats in breeding season. You don't get much hotter than that unless you're a turkey. And, well, we wouldn't call them turkeys exactly, though, would we? But let's hear, bring old Bill in. We don't, old Bill Monroe, some of his earlier stuff.
You know, I really like sitting around on Mondays and, you talk like, what you said there before was, you felt like you was there with me.
Yeah.
Well, what I feel like when I open up the microphone and sitting there and I'm talking to somebody in Vico, especially, people like Kate Burton who listens to me every Monday, I'm no longer in that radio station, you see. I'm right there in the living room with Kate. I'm talking to Kate in her living room, I'm not talking to Kate over a microphone. And that's what radio really means to me. I'm sitting there and I can be in anybody's living room I want to be as long as they're listening to me that day. And I really enjoy that. So I'm sitting there, and sometimes even I'll ask the question and answer it myself. I say, and I answer it myself. And it would probably be the same answer that Kate would give me if I was sitting there with her.
So that was the voice of Buck Maggard. That'd be a fun way to kind of frame this whole thing. WMMT is something you could hear in your living room, like somebody's right there with you. And so maybe if we could start by, for those of y'all who may not know, if y'all could introduce yourselves and your affiliation with this radio station.
Jim, you're the oldest living inhabitant.
All right. I am Jim Webb in real life. But thanks to WMMT, I'm also Wiley Coyote. I started doing my show, riding around listening to the radio with Wiley Coyote in December of 1985, about a month after WMMT went on the air. And I'm still doing it on Wednesday afternoons. There are a lot of different ways to talk about this, but earlier on in my life, I'm a writer, a poet, and after the Great Flood of 1977, the Great Central Appalachian Flood of 1977, when I was living in the neighborhood of Williamson, West Virginia, and it was devastated. Mate 1, Williamson, it was like an atomic bomb had hit. A group of us got together to try to figure out what we could do. There was no food. Everything was flooded. The banks were flooded. Money was useless. I could have saved a little bit of it, but it really wasn't, At any rate, a group of us started it, and we started as the Tug Valley Disaster Center, and we brought the first food into Williamson, and we set up in the Presbyterian Church, and we're, distributing what food we could get. And the government, of course, was pitifully slow, just like with Katrina, and so we set up, and then after the initial few months, we became the Tug Valley Recovery Center, and we started trying to help anybody who needed help, giving advice, and we said a whole cross-section of folks were doing this, and we started a newspaper. It was called the Sandy New Era, and so I started a political satirical column called Riding Around Listening to the Radio with Wiley Coyote, because at one of our community meetings one night, somehow that name, it's WILEYQUIXOTE, and people to this day still call me Wiley Coyote. And, it kind of, it's just like if your name was Smith and they call you Jones, it kind of hurts my feelings. But, and so that's where Wiley Coyote started. And I wrote this column for several years in the newspaper. And then I ended up back here, but I had heard a community radio station in northern Michigan. And I knew, it was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard over the airwaves. A friend of mine did a show. At one time he played 8 baby songs in a row. And that changed my life and affected my radio programming if you ever listen to my show.
That explains a lot, actually.
Yeah, it does explain a lot. I thought how cool it was to play 8 baby songs in a row. Baby love, goo goo gaga, stuff like that. So at any rate, when I came back here to take care of my dad, I saw that Appalshop was starting a community radio station. And I'd always supported Appalshop. All the way back. And so I got involved. And I thought, oh, man, this is going to be great. If I'm going to live here, this is going to be a wonderful thing. And so that's why I got involved with it. And right after it went on the air and stuff, I came to some of the meetings before it went on the air. But right after it went on the air, I volunteered, and so I signed up for Wednesdays from 4 to 7 because I thought if I'm such a derelict that if I can't show up at 4 o'clock on Wednesday, and my life is so exciting that I can't stay till 7 on a Wednesday in the middle of the week, then I can't do it. But I proved to myself that I could. But at that particular time, the only kids we could get, the only people we could get right after school were kids. You know, they all wanted to be DJs and stuff, which was great. So the program director came to me and said, would you change to another time? And so that they could put kids in on that slot, you know, kids who don't drive and stuff like that, 4 to 7 on Wednesday. And I said, no, I've proven that I can do this. I can be responsible. And Rich will tell this because, you know, the worst thing you want is somebody who doesn't show up to do their show. And this is in the days of vinyl. You got to figure out no computers, no, vinyl. When, you know, that's the only way you could put stuff out over the air. And so I don't mean to take all this up. So, okay, I'll abbreviate. And so after 6 months, the station manager left, and the program director came to me and said, will you help out here on a daily basis? Since I lived here and I really wasn't looking for a job. And so I said, sure. That was the first time we started coming on the air at the same time every day. Because I thought, well, if I'm going to do it. So we actually started coming on the air at 10 o'clock in the morning every day and going off at the same time. And that's how I did shows like the Whole Grain Elevator and Duck Soup, because I was filling all these slots. Well, if I'm here, and I love doing it, you know, playing records. I had about 3,000 record albums. Music was my, listening to music and stuff like that. So, well, what happened was 7 days after I started working here, we got hit by lightning or something. Something happened that we were knocked off the air. So I came in to sign us on at 10 o'clock, and we weren't on the air. We couldn't, you know. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know diddly. All I knew was to play vinyl. And the program director, she came in, and I said, we're off the air. She said, oh, turned around and left. And nobody ever saw her again. So I went from being a volunteer to running the damn thing in 7 days. Now, that's how good I am.
I'm Ray Lawson, but I'll say one thing before I go on. Wiley was the coolest old hippie poet that I'd ever met because he said so. And so after a number of years, one night, had some young folks on the air and was doing something that was inappropriate, and Wiley went in to chastise them and tell them how it's supposed to be done. And as he left the room, he heard one of them say, I don't pay attention to him. He's just an old fuddy-duddy. Wiley went out there outside there, and he was heartbroken that somebody would call him an old fuddy-duddy. So, but we love him anyway. Anyway, Ray Lawson, I'm probably one of the oldest, in more ways than one, listeners of WMMT. I happened to stumble across it on the first day that they were on the air testing. And for whatever reason, I had a cassette in a boombox at my office. And because I liked the music I was hearing. And so I started recording. And then Don Muscle, the engineer that was responsible for building the station from an engineering standpoint, came on the air and said they were testing. And if anybody was listening, to give them a call to see how the signal was coming out. I didn't call, other people did. But I've got that tape, and I think I've shared it.
And we want to remind you that you are listening to WMMT FM, Whitesburg, Kentucky, 88.7 on your FM dial. non-commercial community radio serving eastern Kentucky and southwest Virginia. We're going to get back to some more of Patsy Cline's greatest hits in a minute. We'll play a little tune to fill in while I flip that record over. We're usually on just from 4 until about 9 at night, but we stumbled across the Patsy Cline record and put it on, and I've already gotten a couple of good comments from one of our friends, Marvin, down the street, and from the humble and lovable Angie over in Virginia. So we're sort of sending these Patsy Cline tunes out to them and to everybody else who likes Patsy Cline. Once again, I'll remind you that you're listening to testing broadcasts from WMMT FM here at the Appalshop building in Whitesburg. We invite you to stay tuned as we continue our testing.
Then I was a listener because of the variety of the music and just the thought of a community radio station which has volunteers doing the programming, whether it be the young folks or the retired folks, environmentalists, coal miners, the whole spectrum of sharing the airwaves. So after becoming a listener, when Gary Rakes and Verlin Sanders was on the air on Bluegrass Express, I guess it was, being in business over in West Virginia, I became an underwriter. So I think I was one of the earlier underwriters. And then later had the opportunity. My father and I, before he passed away, used to listen to First Note and Jazz on Saturday mornings together and enjoyed that. And then I became friends with Jim Webb, and he's really responsible for my being here for 30 years. The opportunity came along. He talked me into trying to be a programmer because I like jazz, and there was an opening. So for a number of years, I did First Note and Jazz on Saturday morning until they did a survey at one of these things and did a poll, and they found out that most of my listeners from the 30s and 40s had died, and so they canceled the show. So then the famous one, Kurt Henderson, had the Backbeat radio show on Wednesday night, and Cheryl and I used to listen to it and try to guess the artists of all the early rock and roll, which is my era, and so really enjoyed that. Then later, the opportunity came along. Well, the big reason is Johnny Montgomery or John Cleveland, which was little Johnny, and then also Woody Goodman on First Note, was killed in an accident, and I was asked to step in and to do early rock and roll, rhythm and blues, and so forth on Wednesday nights. So been doing that for a number of years. So since day one, I've been affiliated and supporter of WMMT because I certainly do believe in it.
Well, my name is Rich Kirby, and I came to the MMT through a sort of a surprising route, actually. I worked with Appalshop starting back in the 1970s, not as a staff member, but as part of the group that got June Apple Records started, and participated in producing some recordings of older musicians and making some recordings of younger musicians. And so I was sort of aware of Appalshop and had a lot of friendship here. But so when MMT went on the air, as it happened, I live over in Scott County, Virginia, which is really kind of out of the listening area. But as it happens, as Don Muscle explained to me, there's something called knife edge refraction. And when the radio signal hits Osborne's Ridge up above the Clinch River, it somehow bends down right into my house. So about that time, Paul Simon came out with Graceland, and whereas I've been, was born and raised on traditional music, the South African music that Paul Simon used on Graceland was just like a bolt of lightning. And as it happens, we had friends who were living in Southern Africa at that time, and I got to sort of craving hearing more of this African music, and made a trip through my friends there. Got arranged to go to South Africa and meet and just got swept away by the whole situation. It was the days of apartheid and all, and the entire society was mobilizing to free itself, and it's an intensely musical society. And boy, it was just an exciting time. So I came back with like a huge load of LPs and cassettes and things, and I went to Marty Newell, who was the station manager, and said, "This is absolutely crazy, to think about in a station in Whitesburg, Kentucky, but could I come on the air once in a while and just play some of this stuff?" He says, "You want to do it Tuesday?" So there you go. I went on actually to producing a whole radio series about this music, and by the time I hadn't produced it here, and by the time I got done with that, there was a staff opening, and I applied for it and stayed here until I still I've no longer employed, but I refuse to leave.
They'll never get rid of us.
That makes 3 unpaid people sitting on the desk on the stage tonight.
I'll tell you what. You mentioned Gary Rakes and Berlin Sanders. Let's listen to that clip. Now some probably. I don't know how many. Probably not more than 3 or 4 people in the room who even know who Gary Rakes was. But he was quite a figure around Wise County back, I guess, 25 years ago. He was a very outgoing person. He was also a prominent county official.
Yeah, he was a clerk of the court at the time he was doing this,
and a major bluegrass fan. And he was buddies with Verlin Sanders, who played the fiddle, a great bluegrass fiddle player, and of course Verlin and Gary, between them, they knew everybody and everything about bluegrass. So they came to us and wanted to start a bluegrass show, and that was the Bluegrass Express, which has been in a number of different people done it over the years. And then they started the Bluegrass Express Live, and so pulled out a clip from about 25 years ago. But this will be just a moment from that that'll stir a few memories for some of you.
All right, I want you to pretend like you're. How many has been to Smith Ridge, the home of the Stanley brothers? I wonder where Catfish is. Is he up there? Need to bring it down just a little bit. Okay. How many? Let's see. This is one time I'm gonna let you raise your hand so I can see. How many have been to Smith Ridge? Okay. What I want you to do is I want everybody that's been Smith Ridge, and everybody that ain't, I want you to close your eyes and pretend like you're at Smith Ridge. We're getting ready for the Ralph Stanley Bluegrass Festival, the brand new stage, and all like that. All right, now if you pretend like that, you can't pretend unless you have the voice of the Ralph Stanley Festival, right? All right, now let's pretend like we're just ready to start. And the voice of the festival will go something like this.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ralph Stanley's Bluegrass Festival. You know, I've put a lot of people on stage, bluegrass and country, even rock festivals. But I'd rather put this man on stage than anybody I know of. So if you would at this time, please welcome the great Dr. Ralph Stanley and the Quince Mountain Boys.
So that was, of course, Willard Hall, who later went on until he passed away last year, was a total stalwart of WMMT.
But there's a bunch of folks in this room who've worked here, been affiliated with this station over the years. Cheryl Marshall is general manager for 10 years, something like that. Held this place together.
Come on up. Come on up.
Cheryl.
Not feeling good.
Oh, okay. If you want to come up, but Tom Hansel ought to come up. He worked with WMMT for quite a while. Yeah, and he was a valuable member of the staff.
He was our designated young person at one time. He came right out of college, and the rest of us were quite a few years out of college.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what to say because you all kind of organically moved into WMMT, and I actually applied for a job at WMMT, which may be unusual thing. I had actually started in radio in high school, so I'd done radio since I was about 15, and then had also gotten involved in video and also gotten involved in environmental activism, and so that's what led me to Appalshop. And when I heard that WMMT had an opening, I said, that's what I want to do. And little did I know what kind of education I would get. So when I started, Nancy Adams was the general manager. And I think, Rich, you were hired right about the same, maybe a couple months before me. Yeah. Jim had been there. I think, Jim, I was your assistant, I think.
Whatever that was.
Tell me about it. And Buck was part-time, and Maxine Kenny was part-time. It would be great if she was here, too. And so, yeah, so I was the lone member under age 50, I guess, at that point in time. And this was the time when WMMT was starting news programming. So what I ended up doing, and this was really my intensive education, was going to just about every school board meeting, fiscal court meeting, mine permit hearing, logging permit hearing, everywhere that things were going on. And that was, you very quickly start to learn what the landscape looks like, literally geographically, but also politically and culturally, through going to all those meetings, as well as just sitting in and meeting all the great programmers. I mean, Gary Rakes, Verlin Sanders taught me a lot. Of course, very few people taught me more than Buck Maggard. The thing that struck me about Buck, a lot of things that have been talked about was already, but one thing is that he knew how to roll with whatever happened. Very few things knocked Buck off his keel.
Do you remember the time that we did that live remote at Clintwood Lumber? Talk about Buck rolling with the punch. Can you recall what I'm thinking about here?
All I remember is Wild Granny and the Unknown Hillbillies were there. You may have to prompt me a little bit more than that.
I can't remember exactly the details, but we were doing a live remote. The business was closed, and we invited all kinds of people in. And there was music, and Buck was, of course, the MC and interviewing everybody. And at some point, off mic, somebody came up to Buck who was a little bit steamed about something. I don't exactly know what, but he wanted to know something about something he'd heard on WMMT that he didn't exactly like. And Buck, without missing a beat, says, "My son handles those things for me," and pointed to Tom.
He did that a lot, yeah. I haven't figured that one out yet. All right.
So I'm now the caretaker of Maxine Kenny's tape dispenser. It was bestowed upon me by Cheryl. I actually think so. I don't know if you remember. One of the first things I learned when I started here was that everything has a story, even toothbrushes that you happen to find in the studio. I'm just going to share one quick story from one of the great and also sometimes difficult parts of working at WMMT is fielding all the calls that we get from our wonderful listeners. And our volunteers do it, the staff does it, and it's all great. And then sometimes there's just some funny moments, though. We got a call upstairs one time from a guy that, a regular listener, saying, I always listen, I love what I'm hearing, but y'all have been playing Jerry Clower for 5 hours. And we're like, okay. And we said, well, we'll go check it out. So we, hung up and went down, and we have it tuned in the office upstairs all the time to the radio, and there was no Jerry Clower. So he calls back, and one of the other ones of us picks it up and talks to him, and we said, well, what are you, are you sure you're hearing it from WMMT? Maybe you have it tuned to something else, or you hooked to something else? He said, no. He's like, I really do like Jerry Clower. I just think maybe y'all should change it. And so then Sam, who used to work with us, promised him he'd go down to his car and turn on the radio there and make sure, Jerry Clower wasn't coming out some other way. And And he did. Sam went down, went to his car, turned it on, and this guy called back again, and third person talked to him. And we were just like, we're really sorry. We'll keep, we're trying to figure it out. And he was just like, okay. And so we go on with the day, and like an hour or so later, we get another call, and it was him again, and he said, I am so sorry. I have had a CD on repeat of Jerry Clower. And it's just like that's every day at WMMT. There's all of those stories. So I just wanted to share that one.
Why can't you fix this?
Why can't you fix this?
Of course, this.
I mean, I like Jerry Clower, Flower Power as much as anyone.
The subtext of that story is that this is the kind of radio station that's not inconceivable that this could happen.
We're going to cut in here for just a second to hear from some folks who make community radio possible. But stay tuned for more Mountain Talk after the break. Welcome back to Mountain Talk. I'm Parker Hobson. Today on the show, on the occasion of WMMT's 40th birthday, we're hearing a special treat from our archives, a retrospective panel about WMMT history that we held here in Whitesburg back in 2015. We return you now to this panel, and where we'll pick things up, longtime WMMT staffer, producer, DJ, and our good friend, Rich Kirby, was asked if he had any stories about our broadcast tower, which is located up on May King Peak on Pine Mountain.
We'll get into snake stories later if you want to, but the transmitter site it's an extremely good site. It looks out over an amazing amount of territory. We get an astonishing amount of coverage for the power that we have, but it is kind of hard to get to, and there have been many adventures over the years, but one that Ray helped out with was we were. This has been about, I think it was 2004, but anyway, some of the equipment started seeming a little bit shaky. We were having a heat wave, and then there was one extremely hot day when the station, we were sort of listening to it in the office, and the signal started breaking up a little bit, and then it would go away for a few seconds and come back. And as the heat of the day built up, it seemed like it was clearly related to the heat. That the thing would go off and stay off for like 30 seconds and then come back. And we're, so obviously a trip to the transmitter is in order, and we're starting to make our preparations to do that. And meanwhile, the station goes off for longer and longer periods of time until it goes off. And then when it comes back, it's like, that doesn't sound like WMMT. But it was sort of a little staticky and broken up, but it became clear that we were broadcasting Clifford the Big Red Dog, which is a total anomaly. What was happening was that somehow the receiver that picks up the microwave, that's supposed to get the microwave off the roof of this building up onto the mountain, was somehow hearing a totally different frequency, a very different frequency coming from the top of High Knob from Blue Ridge Public Television. And so as the day went on, the machine, the STL receiver stabilized until we were broadcasting a crystal clear version of Clifford the Big Red Dog. So by the time Ray and I got Ray's truck and we horsed it up that gosh awful road, and by the time we got up there, we were doing the McNeil Lehrer News Hour. And I've had just an emergency order from some piece of equipment to be overnighted from someplace. Just another day at radio.
When we replaced the transmitter, when the transmitter wore out and stuff like that, we had to hire a helicopter company from St. Louis to carry it up there. And we moved halfway up Pine Mountain, and Ray and Lawson Water helped do all of that and stuff. But the helicopter, we took the transmitter up to just right around the American Legion, if you've ever gone up Pine Mountain and stuff like that. And that's where the helicopter picked it up to carry it up there. I mean, we literally couldn't carry it up there in a truck or anything.
No, there's some pictures on the wall out there of that helicopter, if you'll look, and with some cargo hanging from the bottom. So the equipment was here. My son David, which I can't thank enough, helped me to do it, but we got the equipment and went up to where Jim was talking about, and that chopper came in and was over us, and David rigged it to pull it out of my truck and then take it up to the transmitter and set it down. And they were working on that chopper. Like you said, it came from St. Louis, and I knew it was an old one. It looked like something from MASH. And I asked him, I said, well, what year is that chopper, you know? He said, well, it's a 50, 51, 52. sound like Johnny Cash about all these parts. But they were replacing the fuel pump on it. Right there up on the mountain, they were replacing the fuel pump on this thing. But I think it cost $5,000 just to get the chopper from St. Louis down here, and then there was X amount of dollars per trip it made, and it made several trips to move that heavy equipment in and set it on the ground. And then we physically had to unpack it and put it in the transmitter up there, this new equipment. But I would like to, if y'all remember my son David, get his help.
It's been an amazing journey and a whole lot of people. Over 70 people have gotten work in radio thanks to WMMT. It's been an incredible journey. If you ever listen to Whitesburg's other station, the first station in Letcher County, Kevin Day is the station manager there, and you'll hear him in the mornings, every morning. He does the swap shop and stuff like that. He started here when he was 14, and he wanted to be a DJ. I wanted to be a DJ when I was in high school, and I actually came to WTCW and WKIC in Hazard, and they weren't interested in stuff. But Kevin, he scouted out all the country. He did a country music show, and he read the magazines, and he would do spotlights on the stars and stuff like that. And he's 14, 15 years old. And it was amazing. And so, after a year or two, I saw the station manager at WTCW, and I said, well, if you ever need one, we've got one that is really, really good. So I think he started at WTCW XKQ at 16, and he's still there. And we've had over 70 people. It was, somewhat unintended. I don't know that anybody ever intended it to be, but it turned out to be one of the greatest Appalachian job training programs ever.
I wanted to ask moments, this is up to anybody up here or anybody in the crowd, when you heard something on the radio and you're like, there's no way this would be on any station other than WMMT.
One of my favorites that might still be playing, I hope, is the PSA or underwriter that Cheryl, you recorded. That's thanks to all the doctors in the region that put homing devices in Appalachian children so that they always know how to come home. Is that the wording? You probably know it better.
Well, let me tell about Granny Goodwitch.
Goodwitch.
Nora Honeycutt, did a radio show here. It's when we were playing vinyl, and she would go to yard sales and places and get music, and you never knew what she was going to play. So, but she was an interesting mix of music. So one day she put something on. There was about 3 minutes of dead air, and she came back on and she said, "Now wasn't that pretty?" And what she'd done is put it on cue, and so she heard it, but nobody else heard it. Now, wasn't that pretty? So that's Possum Radio. That's volunteer programmers. And we've all forgotten, left the mic on while we're having a conversation, which we shouldn't have done. And we've all made our little boo-boos.
And Granny was in her late 70s.
Yeah.
And she came here every way. She was on before me. And it was always a treat.
She had I don't want to get too bogged down in technicalities here, but Q is the thing that you have in the on-air room where you can play something on a separate set of speakers that's not going out over the air. So you can hear, for example, if a record is about to start, or exactly which song is that, or you can just hear it there in the studio. And we had a board that where you would turn it down, the volume of any of the microphone or the record player or whatever down to 0, or you could turn it up. But if you clicked it past 0, if you turned it down to 0 and just pushed it a little bit more, it would go into Q. And you can't have a microphone on Q because the microphone picks up the sound of the speakers, the other speakers, and it puts it out over the main speakers, and it comes back and it goes, you get this giant feedback loop. But we had an auxiliary microphone on a little mixer that was on a channel that didn't have that cutoff feature. And so Granny Goodwitch had been on the air talking to somebody and had their mic turned up. And when she turned it down, she turned it too far, and she turned it into Q. So the mic was live, and it started feeding back. And she had no idea why. All she knew was that there was suddenly this noise in the... So after she'd done this, so she turned the mic back up, and of course then the Q thing stopped. But then there she was, well, not knowing quite what to do. So she turned it off again, and it started roaring, and she turned it... And every time she turned it off, it'd start roaring, so she had to turn it back on. But then she had a live mic, and she was just sitting there, and so she had to talk. So we were in the room next door, having a staff meeting or something, and some AMI student came by and said, "Are you the radio staff? There's a lady in here that says she can't get off the air." Bethy. Oh, Marvin.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, with well, Marvin. Starvin' Marvin, Rockin' Marvin, and Jokin' Marvin. Marvin lived down the street with his older sisters. He was retired from Pigman's Cleaners, and he came by the Appalshop every day. And he made his rounds across town and stuff. And so one day, I forget who it was supposed to be on the air, and we went down, and Marvin was on the air. And Marv, I said, "Marv, you all right?" And he said, "Yeah." So from then on, he became one of our most valuable programmers. He ended up doing Rockin' Marvin's Atomic Fireball Hour. But my favorite Marvin story is on my show on Wednesdays. He would always stop by, and say, "Hey, Marv, how you doing?" Stuff like that. And I'd ask him if he had a joke. And sometimes we would, and sometimes we wouldn't, and stuff like that. But one day, he came in. I said, this is now that after he's been rocking Marvin and starving Marvin. He says, I said, "Marvin, you got a joke?" He told me a joke. And he said, "What do football players and flies have in common?" I didn't know. He said, "They're both looking for the sugar bowl." Well, I started laughing. He started laughing. We both started laughing. We could not stop for 5 minutes. A little bit after 5 o'clock on a Wednesday, there was nothing but laughing going on. And that's one of my favorite. Marvin, and there are many.
Yeah, Marvin used to sit in with Gary Rakes and Verlin, come in on the Bluegrass Express and just sit there with him, but they'd try to put him on the mic and he never would say anything, you know. But apparently he was observing what they were doing. So there was a time when we had dead air, and I think it might have been you, Jim, I don't know. Somebody came down to check on why we got dead air.
No, that was it, yeah.
And before they got here, we were back on the air, and they came into the on-air room, and there was Marvin, and he had been home listening and heard dead air, and came down, and he knew what to do to get us back on the air. You know, so that's pretty amazing, really. Now, like we mentioned, some of the old equipment that we had the toggle switches to turn mics on and off and the turntables. The carts were in the 8 tracks that you plugged in. They had the big old black potentiometers on the board, and it was quite different than what it is today. No computers, nothing. You just, mostly vinyl. We mostly played vinyl, in those days. But Marvin knew what to do and had us back on the air, and nobody knew, and he never said a word on the air.
I believe Marvin is our most favorite programmer ever.
He did a heck of a women's voices.
Yep.
Turned into Marvina.
Yeah, right. He did, and I mean, he could fill in for anybody, and he did it.
I was on the radio one night, and he called me and said, "What you doing? You remember that?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I'm playing, what was it? Number 5 on every CD I'm playing." He said, "Yep." He said, "Number 7's good too."
Just in that spirit of kind of people just kind of showing up, we've had some really incredible musicians just kind of show up here over the years, including future National Heritage Award winners. And I was wondering if you could introduce the clip of Morgan Sexton that we have.
Oh, yeah. Some of you know or knew Morgan very well. He was he's Lee Sexton's uncle. Lee will be playing at Seedtime tomorrow. And Lee learned banjo from Morgan, who was a very kind of a humble man and never really played in public. I think the first time he ever played in front of an audience was, I guess it was either the first or the second Seedtime. I think it was the second Seedtime here on this stage was the first time he had ever been on a stage playing. But he was a master musician, and he was one of the many people who felt like they could just strike up a conversation with Buck any old time. So he would, whenever he was in town, if Buck was on the air, he would come in and sit down, and Buck would open up the microphone, and they would just go at it. And so we got a clip here of Morgan describing to Buck and live on the air how his daddy when he was a little boy, his daddy made a banjo for him.
He had a little old rim, about 8 inches rim. Well, he took a piece of poplar wood, hewed it out, he made him a neck, put in it, put the screws in it. The next thing, he went to the hill, he killed a big old groundhog, man, it's a big one. He brought it out, he skinned it out. We eat the groundhog meat, and then he took the hide and put it in the churn and put ash and stuff in on it. Ash had lye in it. He let it stay in there until the hair went slipping off that hide. He took that out, then he just got him an old sharp board, he just rub over that board, back and forth, just like this, stir it up and down like that. And he got all the hair off of it. Then he put it back and put in some soap and stuff, so to keep it soft and stuff. And well, he let it stay 3-4 days, he got it back out. He got over another sharp board, he just kept rubbing that up, seesawing it this way, that way. He got all that felt and stuff off that hide down. Hide it down pretty thin. Well, then he put it back in the tub again, and a lot more soap. That stayed a few days, took it back out, and then that time, hide dried out, it was soft, it was flexible. It wasn't stiff or nothing. Well, then he took and mounted on his hook, and got his steel string put in there. He played the banjo then, man. That's where I learned to play the banjo, on an old homemade banjo.
So yeah, you could just be driving around and tune that in. It's pretty amazing.
Could I share one thing? How many of you ever heard the song Rock, Salt, and Nails? A really fine song. Utah Phillips was performing here one night on a Wednesday night. And I mean, the amazing musicians that we've had here. And I was interviewing him on my show, which was, Wednesday before the concert and stuff. And his song, Rock, Salt, and Nails, changed my life in terms of my appreciation of music. I hated country music. I hated bluegrass music. I thought it was, hick stuff. And I was kind of a rock and roll and folk music guy. Kingston Trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary was folk music to me. And he wrote that song. And he wrote it coming back on a troop ship from the Korean War. Oh, he had gotten a Dear John letter, and he got up, he left down below where all of these returning soldiers and stuff were having a rough time on this ship. He went up on deck, and he wrote that song in response to this Dear John letter. And it's very, 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 it's an incredibly beautiful song, but very bitter. If you I'll fill up my shotgun with rock, salt, and nails. And so Flatt and Scruggs recorded it without his knowledge. And he was doing this concert here, and I had told him, I said, your song, Rock, Salt, and Nails, changed my life. He said, oh, well, it's that I said, will you do that? And he said, no, I don't do that song anymore because I don't feel that way anymore. And I've forgiven, I've forgotten all of that. He didn't do that song. And I said, oh, man, I love that song. He says, you like that song? I said, oh, yeah. He says, well, I give it to you. Utah Phillips gave me Rock, Salt, and Nails on WMMT. That's the story.
That's amazing.
One thing while we're all here, why is WMMT important? We've been doing this thing for 30 years. A lot of times you're in there, you have no idea if anybody's listening. Sometimes, you hear it. But why do it? Why is this thing important?
It's important if you ever listen to Catfish Gene on Thursdays. You'll know why it's important.
You hear music that you will not hear other places. And we don't always like all the music that we hear, but how do you know what you like until you've heard something? And so we always on our show try to mix in something kind of obscure because we've discovered it and feel like some people in the audience may also enjoy it as much as we have. You're not going to find that on any other radio station. And again, as I said earlier, it's the community, it's the volunteers, it's the personalities, it's the mistakes that we make that you feel like that you know everybody and you're a part of it. And even as a listener, I think you feel the same way. And I just can't imagine, particularly being in this area, as isolated as we are. We're all Appalachian Americans, and to not have WMMT, and I feel very strongly about it.
Well, I think it has been important to a lot of people who are important to me. But another way to look at it is simply that it's fun, and it better be. If you write a book or paint a painting or do a movie or something, you have the agony of the artist, or you might, or maybe you'll just have the best time ever was sitting there writing. But one way or another, you have something at the end that will be there, even when you're gone. Radio is absolutely the opposite. It's here, it's gone. To some extent, you can record things and listen back to them later, but basically radio is of the moment. And I don't think any of us would have stayed with this if it wasn't just rewarding in a lot of ways. It can be really frustrating. There have been heartaches, there have been frustrations, but there have been just these moments just shining moments that just appear, and the relationships that you make with people that you listen to, or you talk to on the phone, or you work with, or whatever. That's how I think I would phrase the answer to that question.
Probably about time to wrap it up here. If anybody has any parting thoughts?
We could play the PSA.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Oh, close out with that.
We'll close out with WMMT's all-time favorite PSA.
I'll ask you folks a question. How many of you folks have got a pet at home, a dog or a cat, something like that? Pets? Okay. Well, this song is for all the pet lovers, and we actually recorded the song. It'll be out on a single CD as a public service announcement here in about a month. And the song just kind of speaks for itself, so we'll send it out to all you folks. Sounds like this right here.
Spay your pet, or you may regret.
You've got to spay or neuter.
It's the best thing for your pet.
If you haven't done it yet, take your pet to the vet. Yes, friends, we're the Lynn Morris Band here at the Appalshop tonight in Whitesburg, Kentucky, with an important message for you and your pets. Now, pet overpopulation can be prevented and controlled by simply spaying or neutering your pets. So, friends, if your pets are already spayed or neutered, get out there, spay your neighbor's pets.
Spay your pet, or you may regret.
You've got to spay or neuter.
It's the best thing for your pet.
If you haven't done it yet,
take your pet to the vet.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank everybody for being here. Thanks everybody for being up on stage, and thank y'all.
Thanks.
You've been listening to a special retrospective panel on WMMT history that we held at the old Appalshop Theater back in 2015. Voices you heard included those of Rich Kirby, Jim Webb, Ray Lawson, Cheryl Marshall, Tom Hansel, Elizabeth Sanders, Sylvia Ryerson, and myself. And today's show is dedicated to our great friends, Jim Webb and Ray Lawson, who we've lost in the years since we taped this. Again, no one show or group of people could tell the whole story of WMMT, and there are so many voices we didn't hear today, without which WMMT would not be what it is. At any rate, we thank you out there for listening and for supporting this amazing, incredible, improbable experiment in Appalachian, people-powered, non-commercial radio, which has now, with your help, been around for 40 years. As we've always said, we couldn't do this without you, and we wouldn't want to. That's it for our show today. Thanks so much for listening. For WMMT, I'm Parker Hobson.